A warm welcome to The World Today. I'm Amarachi Ubani. Here's what's coming up on the program. U.S. markets surge after the U.S. and China agree to reduce tariffs on each other's goods for 90 days. British Prime Minister Keir Starmer promises to reduce net migration and tighten up the immigration system. Plus, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi says India inflicted unimaginable damage on Pakistan in 3 days. Let's begin The World Today. UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer has promised to cut net migration to the UK as he unveiled the government's proposals to tighten up every part of the immigration system. English tests for all visa applicants and an extended route to settled status from 5 to 10 years are just two of the planned changes. The Prime Minister also wants to cut recruitment of overseas care workers. The measures aim to reduce illegal migration, which makes up the majority of migration to the UK. It does not include addressing small boat crossings or other ways people arrive in the UK without permission. His early morning announcement and subsequent release of a white paper outlining the plans has sparked some criticism. Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch claimed that Labour cannot be trusted to protect the borders, while leader of the Reform UK, Nigel Farage, said Starmer is making promises he cannot keep. Scotland's First Minister John Swinney says the Prime Minister's announcement today will damage the economy, the NHS, social care and universities.
Sometimes it was a choice made even as they told the country, they were doing the opposite. A one-nation experiment in open borders, conducted on a country that voted for control. Well, no more. Today, this Labour government is shutting down the lab. The experiment is over. We will deliver what you've asked for time and again, and we will take back control of our borders. I'm doing this because it is right, because it is fair, and because it is what I believe in. Let me put it this way. Nations depend on rules, fair rules. Sometimes they're written down, often they're not. But either way, they give shape to our values, guide us towards our rights, of course, but also our responsibilities, the obligations we owe to each other. Now, in a diverse nation like ours, and I celebrate that, these rules become even more important. Without them, we risk becoming an island of strangers, not a nation that walks forward together. So when you have an immigration system that seems almost designed to permit abuse, that encourages some businesses to bring in lower paid workers rather than invest in our young people, migration will fall. That's a promise. But I want to be very clear on this. If we do need to take further steps, if we do need to do more to release pressure on housing and our public services, then mark my words, we will. But it's not just about numbers, because the chaos of the previous government also changed the nature of immigration in this country. Fewer people who make a strong economic contribution, more who work in parts of our economy that put downward pressure on wages. So perhaps the biggest shift in this white paper is that we will finally honour what take back control meant and begin to choose who comes here so that migration works for our national interest.
The UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Let's cross the pond now into the United States, which has agreed with China a deal that will significantly cut the import tariffs they have imposed on each other in a major de-escalation of their trade war. The changes mean the US tariffs on Chinese imports will fall to 30% from 145 while China's tariffs on U.S. goods will drop to 10% from 125%. The announcement came after intensive talks in Switzerland, the first between the two countries since U.S. President Donald Trump levied steep tariffs on Chinese imports last month.
In addition, yesterday we achieved a total reset with China after productive talks in Geneva. Both sides now agreed to reduce the tariffs imposed after April 2nd to 10% for 90 days as negotiators continue on the larger structural issues. And I want to tell you that a couple of things. First of all, that doesn't include the tariffs that are already on, that are our tariffs, and it doesn't include tariffs on cars, steel, aluminum, things such as that, or tariffs that may be imposed on pharmaceuticals, because we want to bring the pharmaceutical businesses back to the United States, and they're already starting to come back now based on tariffs because they don't want to pay 25, 50, or 100% tariffs, so they're moving them back to the United States. I spoke to Tim Cook this morning, and he's going to, I think, even up his numbers, $500 billion. He's going to be building a lot of plants in the United States for Apple, and we look forward to that. I really do look forward to that.
We have reached an agreement on a 90-day pause and substantially moved down the tariff levels. Both sides on the reciprocal tariffs will move their tariffs down 115%. We had very robust discussions. Both sides showed great respect. It was a chance for me to meet the Chinese delegation. The vice premier I had previously had only a video call with. Ambassador Jameson was familiar with two of the other leaders on the delegation from his previous time. So there was very good personal interaction. Both countries represented their national interests very well. We concluded that we have shared interest, and we both have an interest in balanced trade.
Chinese International Trade Representative with the Minister of Commerce, Li Keqiang, says the deal to slash tariffs with the United States would be in the best interest of China. He was addressing a press conference in Geneva earlier today. It came just before the announcement of an agreement between the U.S. and China to reduce tariffs over 100% in both sides. At the time of the press conference, it was confirmed tariffs will be cut for 90 days. U.S. tariffs on Chinese imports fall to 30%. And Chinese ones on U.S. goods will fall to 10%. The U.S. and China concluded high-level trade talks in Geneva. Li referred to them as having reached important consensus and announced the launch of a new economic dialogue forum between the two nations. So the US president's announcement about tariffs cuts with China did have an impact on the market, causing stocks to surge. Markets in the US are now trading at similar levels to the beginning of the year. Here's where the three main indices are open today. The S&P 500 is up 2.6%, NASDAQ is up 3.3%, the Dow Jones up 2.5%. Stocks from companies or for companies with Chinese imports also jumped. Shares in Target, for example, have jumped more than 5%, while Nike is up more than 8%. Oil prices and the dollar have also risen. Let's bring in our correspondent in Washington, Maria Bird, to discuss the reactions to this. Maria, great to see you. Now, weeks before now, the U.S. president had been teasing talks with China, even though there really wasn't anything going on behind the scenes. Now we have a deal. Help us understand how we got to this point where Trump is taking the glory for what has already happened.
He wanted to address trade. It's very clear that tariffs has been one of the number one areas of focus for him since his campaign. And so as we saw, he was very clear on putting those tariffs in place. Many countries came to the table. China obviously was one of the last ones for him to have discussions with. But obviously China has been watching this all along. He has been stating, kind of that he was looking for this day for quite some time now. Now, he did not expect, obviously, from what we heard earlier, that this day was coming at this time. But I think that his strategy all along was to bring China to the table. As many American business owners have stated, America takes in so many goods and purchases so much from China. It would be very devastating and has been quite a challenge for the American small business owners who import from China each and every day. And so I think that this was a long time coming. I think the president was very clear and received obviously much pressure from large corporations. As we know, the technology industry, the things that are needed for Apple, are many of which are imported from China. We think of just an average cell phone. So many of those parts come from China. And so I think it was inevitable for this day to happen. But I think many Americans are hopeful. As you stated, the stock market has skyrocketed as a result of this. So this was one of the major players in the president's efforts to address trade relationships across the globe.
Yeah, and the U.S. president can, he does seem to be on a winning streak this week, coming from the weekend. First of all, with Russia, Ukraine. Ukrainian president is saying he's willing to join the Russian president later in the week. Of course, we'll discuss that later. And then also with India, Pakistan, and now with China. So we've gone from 145% to 125%. Looking at, the trade deficit that existed between the two countries and, this agreement today, would you call it a win-win for both the U.S. and for China?
It's very interesting because I think if we just look at it from the percentages, right, it looks like the U.S. Has taken a step forward in being able to accomplish much of what they were hoping to. And looks like China might not. But I think that we have to really look at the full picture. I think it's really going to depend upon what this ends up after the 90 days. I'm sure there'll be plenty of more negotiations between now and then. As we know, the president has no problem making U-turns. He's done it time and time again. Whether or not China has received any sort of inkling that this is not going to be a forever type of tariff and we will see a reduction, I think that is really where these trade agreements are going to be key and critical. And I think that's really what the 90 days is going to be spent on, is being able to really detail, because there's so much trade that happens between the U.S. and China that it really requires more than just a weekend conversation. And we know people are watching it all through the night, kind of this pending what was going to be the outcome of these talks. And so I think that's really what we're looking to see. And then it will likely be potentially a win-win for both sides.
It does kind of seem like we have been here before, with the U.S. and with China, and with the same U.S. president and same Chinese president, when Trump's first term in office, how the U.S. and China almost came to a blown-out diplomatic row. But here's the thing, though. Why is President Trump deciding to go this route, imposing the tariffs before talks, when simple diplomacy could have prevented this shake-up and destabilization of the global economy?
Well, as we know, the president came into the office from his first administration to now his second administration and been very clear he's not a diplomat, he's not a politician. He sees himself as a business owner and someone who really reflects more of the ideals of a business person. And so I think that is where you're seeing these very different tactics in the way in which he plans to govern. And I think that is what he promised his base when he came into office, is that he would be governing very different. We knew that from the first administration. I think we're expecting that this administration. And so, as you said, what we might have seen in traditional government structure where diplomacy is enacted, he takes very different strategies in trying to accomplish the goals. The question, though, is whether or not this will impact the everyday American life. We know that unemployment is continuing to increase. We know that people are still dealing with inflation. We know that interest rates have not dropped, and we know Americans are still dealing with struggling to pay their everyday bills. And so, how is this going to impact middle America that is looking for some sort of relief? And we know that obviously the stock market, some of the challenges it's been experiencing, have definitely impacted those who are major supporters of his because they have such heavy investment in the stock market. But I think that's really the question, is that once we get through these, what is going to be the outcome for the everyday American's pocket?
And people have been looking forward to be able to at least buy Chinese goods, not at the inflated prices that they are right now on the shelves. We talked about the markets earlier, saying that most of the stocks, the major stocks at least, are high. Are they still high at this time?
The stocks are fluctuating. They're staying pretty high. It's expected that we're going to see one of the highest days that we've seen in quite some time, things that we saw early in the year. There was great expectation for the stock market right at the beginning of the president's and prior to him coming into office. And so I think that we're seeing those type of numbers from early January. I think we can expect to see that throughout the day. We could see some of the highest earnings and obviously some major, especially the tech industry is going to probably show some major gains, and investors are going to be looking to invest there as well. But he's also mentioned the pharmaceutical industry, and so that's going to be up for question to see if the pharmaceutical industry also shows some gains over the day.
Does this mean that U.S.-China relations are back on track? I mean, the president did say that he'll be speaking with the Chinese President Xi Jinping later this week. That means that there is some, some defrosting, of relations between the two, right?
Some defrosting, you're correct. I think that we also know that in addition to defrosting, there was some major economic implications for the entire world, and specifically for two major economic powerhouses, the U.S. and China. And so when you talk about those type of economic challenges that China was beginning to experience, it was the only thing that I think both countries could do. And I think the president in the U.S., President Trump, was hopeful because he knew that there was only so long the U.S. could sustain those type of pressures. And so that is one of the things I think that both countries realize, that whether or not there's going to be a close ally diplomatic relationship, I think the understanding of the business need far outweighs some of the relationship moving forward in the future.
And how soon can we see the ink on paper regarding this deal that President Trump has been flaunting and, parading before the American people, a win for his government?
So as we know, the president is very big on ink on paper. We saw a flood of executive orders very early in his administration, and we continue to see those. And so I would expect maybe sometime later today. We're now at around noon Eastern Standard Time, and so we still have about 4 or 5 more hours until you typically have your evening press releases around, and the press secretary could come out with some sort of additional statements and information of that nature. We also don't know whether or not China is interested in kind of some sort of ink on paper. So I think if we don't see anything by today, at the latest tomorrow, we might not be seeing anything until 90 days from now. But highly expectation that the president will have something for later today, as I think he was expecting to start the week off with this type of news, as you said, and what he's claiming as a victory for his administration.
Maria, thanks again for joining us. Away from the United States now, tens of millions of Filipinos have voted in the country's midterm elections, which will decide half the 24-strong Senate, or 317 members of the House of Representatives, and thousands of local municipal leaders and legislators. Polls closed at 7 p.m. local time, and initial partial and unofficial results show that the nation, based on the key race for 12 Senate seats, is split pretty evenly between the incumbent President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. and his predecessor Rodrigo Duterte. Official declarations are due in a week after candidates have had a chance to challenge the outcome. Local TV stations are now reporting the unofficial Election Commission results from 68% of polling stations, and they're still the same as has been reported at least 45 minutes ago by local media. However, there is no information on where in the country the declared results are from, so there's no way to tell how the outstanding votes might affect the final results. Welcome back to the world today. Pope Leo XIV on Sunday used his first message to the world to appeal for no more war. His message came from the balcony of St. Peter's Basilica, reflecting on current conflicts. The newly elected pontiff called for lasting peace in the war in Ukraine, a ceasefire in Gaza, and he also welcomed Saturday's agreement to end recent hostilities between India and Pakistan. In his first Regina Caeli at St. Peter's Basilica on Sunday, Pope Leo called for a just and lasting peace in Ukraine, an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, and welcomed the truce between India and Pakistan. No more war, he says. I carry in my heart the suffering of the beloved Ukrainian people. Let every possible effort be made to achieve a genuine, just and lasting peace as soon as possible. It comes as European leaders stood beside the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on Saturday, demanding an unconditional ceasefire from Russia and warning Moscow of tougher sanctions if peace efforts fail. Back in the Vatican, Pope Leo quoted the late Pope Francis, saying that the global conflicts affecting so many people around the world equate to a third world war in pieces. He also welcomed the announcement of the ceasefire between India and Pakistan and said he hopes there can be a lasting agreement. The ceasefire announcement was made by U.S. President Donald Trump on social media. It comes hours after 4 tense days of cross-border clashes. Behind the scenes, U.S. mediators, alongside diplomatic back channels and regional players, proved critical in pulling the nuclear-armed rivals back from the brink of war. But hours after the deal, India and Pakistan traded accusations of fresh violations, underscoring its fragility. Wearing the simple white cassock of the papacy and his silver pectoral cross, Pope Leo noted that this Sunday is Mother's Day in many countries and wished all mothers, including those in heaven, a happy Mother's Day.
Mi addolora profondamente quanto accade nella striscia di Gaza.
And back in Ukraine, the President Volodymyr Zelensky said on Sunday he expects Russia to confirm a ceasefire starting today, and that he's also prepared to meet with his Russian counterpart in Turkey on Thursday for direct talks to end Moscow's war, now in its 4th year. Ukrainian President Zelensky said he would be in Turkey to negotiate with President Vladimir Putin personally, and that he was hoping for a complete ceasefire in Russia's war against his country starting Monday. His words came in response to Putin's remarks to the media overnight, in which he effectively ignored the idea of a ceasefire pushed for by Western leaders and proposed restarting direct talks with Ukraine in Istanbul on Thursday, instead without any preconditions. Putin also did not specify whether the talks would involve Zelensky and him personally. Zelensky said on X on Sunday morning it was a positive sign that the Russians have finally begun to consider ending the war, and that the entire world has been waiting for this for a very long time. In the same vein, President Zelensky also invited the newly elected leader of the Roman Catholic Church, Pope Leo XIV, to Ukraine during the first phone call today. He appreciated the pontiff for advocating peace in Ukraine during his first Sunday address. Zelensky also revealed that they discussed the thousands of Ukrainian children deported by Russia, adding that Kyiv was counting on the Vatican's help in returning them home. Russia's ally in Asia, China's Minister of Foreign Affairs, has expressed Beijing's advocacy for the Russian President Vladimir Putin's initiative to hold direct talks with Ukraine. A press conference held earlier today was presided over by a spokesperson, Li Jiang. He says we support all efforts to establish peace, hope that the parties concerned will continue to negotiate through dialogue to reach a just, lasting and binding peace agreement acceptable to all parties and ultimately achieve a political solution to the Ukrainian crisis. He stressed that the dialogue and negotiation is the only viable way of the crisis in Ukraine and highlighted Beijing's readiness to constructively cooperate with both sides and the international community in finally resolving the crisis and achieving lasting peace. Let's bring in Ukrainian journalist Natalya Gumyuk. She's in Kyiv, where she joins us from. Natalya, great to see you, and thanks for joining us on the program. Are Ukrainians just as optimistic as President Zelensky about this upcoming meeting that's supposed to take place on Thursday?
I think there is hardly anybody who believes this meeting will take place, and I'm not speaking just about the general public, but people who are following the process. It's part of the, let's say, bigger process, because somehow it's very hard for the American president, Donald Trump, to accept that he might he shouldn't probably fully trust Vladimir Putin. For Donald Trump, it's very hard to accept that he might be told untruths. And for quite some time, the Russian counterparts were trying to portray Ukraine as a difficult partner. Therefore, it's the movement from the Ukrainian side to say, no, we are there, we are ready. Ukraine has a good relations with Turkey, in particular President Zelensky with the Turkish leader Erdogan. So it's okay for him to go. But what Russia really wants to reach at this moment is really to persuade the Washington that it's Ukraine which doesn't want to negotiate, with a very specific goal. So the United States won't provide any support to Ukraine, which would definitely benefit Russia. So this game is unfortunately happening. I should also remind that since the elections of Donald Trump, there was no a second when the situation in the front line or on the ground has changed. It sounds very different on the social media platform, but for Ukrainians, actually the intensity of the war for the last months is probably even higher.
What's even interesting, Natalya, is the fact that the Russian president has not or did not address the call for a ceasefire, did not address the venue for the talks, and has also not addressed whether or not he will be addressing President Zelensky face-to-face.
Oh, yes, but that's nothing surprising. Ukraine is in the talks with Russia for, honestly, already 12 years. So if we're speaking about the first Russian occupations in 2014, and again, sometimes it's possible with some partners to persuade that we are ready to negotiate. That's, the Russian pitch. But again, if we speak about the details, what exactly should happen, because in this regard, the war would be over if Russia would just pull out its troops from the Ukrainian territories. But we're now speaking just about the stop of the, I'm not even speaking about the activities on the front line, because it's a 100 kilometers front line where the battles are intense. But on a daily basis, we do have the attacks on the more on the towns further from front line, like the capital Kiev, which Vladimir Putin is in control. So yes, but I think in this regard, it's a new again, like it's a new period on the US participation in these negotiations. There was a strong push from the White House during the first 100 days of Donald Trump presidency. Now, the Americans are not pushing that hard because probably they also understand it's more difficult. Yet it would be interesting if something like that happened. I think it's just becoming, the situation maybe is more, it's becoming less foggy for some of the observers outside of Ukraine to understand the Russian position better if, let's say, Putin is pushed to the corner when he definitely is invited to speak. So it's up to him now.
Yeah, do you think he was pushed by the leaders who met with the Ukrainian president on Saturday, that meeting that they had in Kyiv, where the leaders promised or threatened massive sanctions on Russia if he did not meet up to the calls for a ceasefire or for talks with the Ukrainian president? Do you think that might have had an impact on him, and therefore he announced that he will be open to talks, direct talks with Ukraine?
So Russia, the European Union, for instance, and European countries do not have that much leverage on Russia. However, it's not totally not the case because Europe is still buying Russian fossil fuel for billions of dollars annually. So Europe matters. But in this regard, what the Kremlin is counting, that the American support, in particular for some things like air defense, which is mainly used for the protection of the civic Ukrainian towns, that it won't be given any longer to Ukraine, or Ukraine won't be able to buy it from the United States, which would make Ukraine more vulnerable. And unfortunately, the European countries are not yet in the position to fully substitute that American support. So that's what Russia counting. But in this regard, that meeting also matters that to some extent, the European Union and the countries like Germany, France, but also the Nordic countries would still provide the defense which may save Ukrainian lives. So I don't think he's pushed. He's still trying to organize and deal with his relations with Donald Trump personally. That's where the game is. But probably the meeting matters something. And the sanctions still are possible. We still don't know what exactly that would be, but they are still doable because Russia has a lot of venues to overcome the sanctions by selling their goods globally to India, to China, to a lot of countries in the Middle East, in Central Asia. So they're still earning quite a lot despite of the European sanctions.
Well, I guess we'll have to wait and see. Thursday's just 4 days from now, or 3, depending on how many hours you're counting. Natalya, thank you again for joining us on the program, and do stay safe. Now, India says all military bases and systems continue to remain fully operational and are ready to undertake any mission if the need arises. This comes 2 days after it entered into a ceasefire with Pakistan, even as the neighboring country violated the understanding just hours later. Addressing a press briefing, Air Marshal A.K. Bhatti said Operation Sindoor, that was launched in retaliation to the Pahalgam terror attack, only ensured targeting of terror camps in Pakistan and Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, and Islamabad was responsible for any losses incurred. The remarks also come as the operation escalated bilateral tensions since it led to strikes and counter-strikes between the two nations. Sources in the army said it was largely peaceful in Jammu and Kashmir and other areas along the international border, which witnessed blackouts and drone attacks and firing by the Pakistani forces last week. Prime Minister Narendra Modi earlier spoke about the operation in Kashmir. He said Pakistan targeted our schools, colleges, places of worship, our military bases and civilian homes. This unmasked Pakistan. Over 100 terrorists were killed in attacks. Many terror bases or bosses ran free in Pakistan. Pakistan drowned in frustration. Instead of helping India against terror, Pakistan attacked us. We took the fight to the heart of Pakistan. We inflicted unimaginable damage in Pakistan in 3 days. The Prime Minister Narendra Modi's words. Top military officials of both countries also held talks earlier today. Now, the U.S. President Donald Trump said he had prevented nuclear conflict between India and Pakistan by using trade threats after that ceasefire announced over the weekend and the latest escalation. Speaking from the White House earlier today, President Trump reiterated the sides reached a ceasefire following days of escalation, with Trump also announcing on his Truth Social account, although Pakistan claimed 36 countries were involved in the attacks.
Before we begin, let me say a few words about the historic events that took place over the last few days. On Saturday, my administration helped broker a full and immediate ceasefire, I think a permanent one, between India and Pakistan, ending a dangerous conflict of two nations with lots of nuclear weapons. And they were going at it hot and heavy, and it was seemingly not going to stop. And I'm very proud to let you know that the leadership of India and Pakistan was unwavering, powerful, but unwavering in both cases, and having these, they really were, from the standpoint of having the strength and the wisdom and fortitude to fully know and to understand the gravity of the situation. And we helped a lot. And we helped also with trade. I said, come on, we're going to do a lot of trade with you guys. Let's stop it. Let's stop it. If you stop it, we're doing trade. If you don't stop it, we're not going to do any trade. People have never really used trade the way I used it. That I can tell you. And all of a sudden they said, I think we're going to stop. And they have. And they did it for a lot of reasons, but trade is a big one. We're going to do a lot of trade with Pakistan. We're going to do a lot of trade with India. We're negotiating with India right now. We're going to be soon negotiating with Pakistan. And we stopped the nuclear conflict. I think it could have been a bad nuclear war. Millions of people could have been killed. So I'm very proud of that. I also want to thank Vice President Vance and Secretary of State Rubio for their work and efforts. They worked very hard on that.
U.S. President Donald Trump. Now, in what seemed like a delayed celebration, thousands of faithful filled Chiclayo's main square on Saturday to celebrate a mass in honor of Pope Leo XIV, the city's former bishop who served the diocese from 2015 to 2023. Crowds waved white balloons, priests celebrated Mass, and Bishop Edinson Erdago Farfan led the ceremony as devotees prayed, sang, and chanted, Pope, friend, Chiclayo is with you. A Mass marked a significant moment for Chiclayo, where Pope Leo XIV, born Robert Francis Prevost, had served as bishop from 2015 to 2013, decades after first arriving in Peru in 1984. Naturalized as a Peruvian citizen during his time in office, Pope Leo is now the first pontiff to hold both American and Peruvian nationality. He was elected last Thursday on the second day of the conclave following two inconclusive rounds of voting. Pope Leo has been welcomed with hope by many who expect his leadership to continue the legacy of Pope Francis, focusing on closeness to marginalized communities and promoting unity in the Catholic Church. And staying in Peru, Robert Prevost's appointment as Pope Leo XIV led to several business booms in the country. Businesses created T-shirts and other items featuring the face of the new pontiff. In a store in Lima, customized T-shirts and with the Pope's image were up for sale. They were on display all over the place. The shop offers various designs that show off the pontiff, including him wearing the Peruvian national team's jersey with the inscription reading, "Now we're going to the World Cup." Well, beyond creativity and business, many merchants feel that this news has brought them a blessing.
¿Cuál otro? Van a quemar. El que está con... Tráele los 6. Ahí está en la silla.
Welcome back. We'll circle around local issues now. The Nigerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs has announced the repatriation of 78 Nigerians who were victims of human trafficking from Abidjan, Cote d'Ivoire. Their repatriation was facilitated by the Nigerian Embassy in Abidjan, by NAPTIP, the Nigerian community in Abidjan, and the International Organization for Migration, all in collaboration with Air Peace Airlines at no cost to the federal government. As a special flight arrived at the Murtala Mohammed International Airport, Ikeja, on Saturday, the rescued victims broke into song celebrating their safe return to the homeland. The ministry, in a statement, has reiterated its unwavering commitment to protecting Nigerians, combating human trafficking, and also condemns the inhumane and criminal acts of the crime, which exploits vulnerable individuals, especially underage girls. It also commended the chairman of Peace Airlines, Dr. Alan Nyema, for his patriotism and kind-hearted intervention, while calling on civil society, international partners, and the general public to join efforts in eradicating the menace. Staying with the message of patriotism, the chairman, Nigerians in Diaspora Commission, Mrs. Abike Dabiri-Erewa, has called on the diaspora to actively engage in the country's ongoing reform efforts. In a video message, she highlighted President Bola Tinubu's introduction of a new executive directive known as the Nigeria First policy. According to Mrs. Dabiri-Erewa, the policy is designed to prioritize Nigeria-centric matters, promote locally made products, and provide homegrown solutions to government procurement.
For the first time in the history of our country, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has signed an executive order for what is known as the Nigeria First policy. Now, this policy prioritizes everything Nigerian first. It promotes homegrown solutions to government procurements. So my brothers and sisters in the diaspora, this is an opportunity for you to key into this initiative. This is an opportunity for you to bring your expertise, your knowledge, your talent back home to Nigeria.
Now, the president of the ECOWAS Commission, Mr. Omar Toure, has clarified that the protocol on the free movement of goods and services under the ECOWAS trade liberalization scheme does not eliminate the need for proper documentation. He made the remark during an official on-the-spot assessment of the Lagos-Seme border, one of the busiest and most strategic land corridors in the West African sub-region. He said the visit is part of ECOWAS's broader efforts to ensure the practical implementation of its protocols and to identify barriers impeding their effectiveness. Our correspondent, Victoria Longjohn, reports.
The Seme border is a significant land crossing between Nigeria and the Republic of Benin, situated in the Badagry division of Lagos State. It lies along the coastal route connecting Lagos to Cotonou in Benin Republic. The border serves as a vital gateway for trade and travel between Nigeria and other West African nations, facilitating the movement of trade and contributing to the region's economic activity. However, the corridor has been fraught with several challenges, such as numerous illegal checkpoints, extortion, smuggling activities, inadequate infrastructure, and neglect. The ECOWAS Free Movement Protocol, adopted in 1979 as a cornerstone of regional economic integration, aimed at creating a borderless West Africa where citizens can trade, invest, and seek opportunities across member states. Therefore, in a proactive stance to evaluate how well the provisions of the ECOWAS Protocol on Free Movement is being applied in real time, the president of the ECOWAS Commission, Mr. Omar Toure, and his entourage make a 200-kilometer drive from Lagos to the Seme border. Along the corridor, the entourage makes the first stop at Baji checkpoint in Badagry for an interaction with commuters and some security agencies manning the borders.
We have been looking for this type of opportunity, but we don't have backup.
The team is then received at the Seme border by officials of the customs and immigrations from Nigeria and Benin Republic. The team then inspects the immigration process and takes a tour of the infrastructure at the border. The president of the commission also engages with the officials who enumerated some of their challenges.
There are things that human beings cannot see, scanners can see. Because when you are bringing cattle from a truck, you cannot, what you do is sample examination, random examination. You cannot open all the cartons. And drugs can be hidden in those cartons. Those ones you did not open. The scanners will see them. Number one border in Nigeria, Abidjan corridor, that connects the whole of French-speaking countries, don't have electric, connected to the national grid. It's even Benin that is giving us light.
We have the phone numbers of the human traffickers. How do we lay our hands? I'm begging that the situation should be created where we could further synergize in tracking those people down to their hidden places.
In response, the ECOWAS president called on border security officials and the national authorities to align with ECOWAS protocols and pledge to deliver recommendations towards addressing all cross-border obstacles.
We should go beyond these charges of being asked to pay money without receipts. If there are any payments to be done, those payments should be officially receipted. When we say free movement of people and goods, we are not saying any type of good should enjoy the ECOWAS trade liberalization scheme. We are talking about community produce.
This visit by the ECOWAS president to the Seme border is particularly significant as it gives him a first-hand experience of how the free movement protocol is being implemented. Amongst other things the ECOWAS president is urging for is the need for proper documentation for persons plying these routes, as he believes this will help enhance the regional integration agenda of the ECOWAS. From the Seme border, Victoria Longjon, Channels Television News.
Security analysts say the fight against violent extremism in the Sahel region of Africa requires a multifaceted approach encompassing military action, regional cooperation, and addressing the root causes of extremism. Although Ghana has not been directly impacted by terror attacks, experts in the country say the radicalization of young Ghanaians by terror groups, especially in the north, near Ghana's border with Burkina Faso, calls for serious concern and concerted efforts to stop the spread of violent extremism in West Africa. Channel Television's correspondent in the Sahel region, Mo Sani Aliu, who is in Ghana, asked the executive director of the Accra-based West Africa Center for Counter-Extremism, Mutaru Mumuni Mokhtar, his assessment of the threat level that Ghana and the coastal states are facing.
In terms of the threat, at the time we began this work, nobody in Ghana felt or thought that this was a legitimate area to work in, because we saw the threat from a distance. There's a distant threat to Ghana, a threat exclusively, in Nigeria, Mali, and maybe some parts of Chad or Niger. At the time in 2014, only 3 countries had terrorism. Today, 57%, actually 53% now, 53% of all West African nations are dealing with terrorism or have had terrorist attacks. Today, as we speak, the trend is moving towards coastal states. It's expanding from the Sahel towards coastal states. And now our direct neighbors, North Burkina Faso, the East Togo and Benin, and the West Cote d'Ivoire, all of these countries have had terrorist attacks. And in fact, in the East, especially in Togo and Benin, we're seeing an increase in attacks. One, whilst the fatality numbers and attacks seem to have reduced by current statistics, it's still a significant source of threat and worry for everyone. Because Burkina Faso, for instance, we have seen global, account. Burkina Faso is responsible for about 19% of attacks globally. And yet, unfortunately, it's responsible for 51% of all fatalities globally. That tells us that this is still a very serious security threat, not only to Burkina Faso, but to all of us within coastal states and the entire region of West Africa. And if you look at the 10-year journey, we have seen some successes and we've seen areas of deterioration and we've seen some areas of significant, success. If nothing at all, it has helped nations, including nations like Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, and others, who have not been impacted the same way as the Sahelian countries, to build some infrastructure, to build resilience, and to build a sense of readiness within the society to be able to counter these vulnerabilities.
We're looking at the lotus-shaped lanterns in Vietnam's Ho Chi Minh City as they celebrate the Vesak festival. Hundreds are flocking to the city just to witness this sight physically, especially these special lanterns that are placed down the Huong River. 6,000 flower lanterns have been given away for free at the Phap Hoa Buddhist Temple. The festival showcases to the international community, to Vietnam and to other places, the respect and protection of freedom of belief and religion. The event is proof of religious freedom in Vietnam and substantive progress in human rights protection. This year's Vesak has drawn 2,700 Buddhists, including 1,300 international attendees from 85 other countries and territories, demonstrating the importance of one of the principal cultural and religious events recognized by the United Nations. The first time Vesak Day has been held in Ho Chi Minh City and the fourth time it's held in Vietnam. That's the world today. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.